The monitor flatlined. Not a beep, but a single piercing tone. And the handcuffed gunshot victim, the one with two armed deputies outside his door, tightened his grip on Nurse Rachel's wrist. His eyes, clouded with painkillers and fear, locked onto hers. He didn't ask for help. He whispered 5 words that meant she could never walk away. Rachel was just doing her job. Another overnight in the ER, another patient in custody. But this man wasn't just another chart. He was a confidential informant, and the bullet in his shoulder was a message. The deputies outside weren't just guards, they were his potential killers. And in that split second, her oath to heal crashed into a truth that could get them both murdered. The night shift was Rachel's sanctuary. From 3 a.m. until dawn, the ER belonged to her. The chaos was predictable: drunks, domestics, the occasional GSW, but tonight's admission was different. The paperwork said John Doe, GSW left shoulder, police escort. The cops at the desk said something else. "Don't get chatty, nurse. This one's a rat." She learned to read the room in nursing school, but she'd mastered it in life. The 2 deputies flanking the gurney weren't just watching the patient. They were watching everyone who came near him. Officer Walsh, with a jaw like granite, and his younger partner, Briggs, whose eyes darted to every exit. Their hands never strayed far from their belts. The patient was listed as Alex Rios, 32 years old. The bullet had nicked the subclavian artery. Surgery had repaired it, but he was fragile, swimming in a cocktail of fentanyl and Versed. Standard protocol for a prisoner patient required 1 officer in the room, unarmed, and 1 outside. These 2 had flipped it. Walsh stood just inside the door, hand on his holster. Briggs was in the hall, leaning against the wall, staring right at her. Rachel's charge was simple: keep him alive until transport to the county jail infirmary at 0600. Check vitals, manage pain, watch for signs of shock. Do not, the charge nurse had muttered, make friends. But Rachel had a tell, a weakness her supervisor warned would break her one day. She saw the person, not the prisoner. The handcuff chain looped through the bedrail, the bruised wrist, the way his eyes fluttered behind closed lids, not in pain but in terror. Even sedated, his body was rigid, braced for the next blow. She was adjusting his IV when his eyes opened. Dark, dilated, drowning in medication, he focused on her badge. "Nurse," he slurred. His cuffed hand twitched. Walsh shifted his weight. "Eyes forward, Rios, no talking." Rachel finished her check, blood pressure stable. Heart rate elevated, but that could be the pain or the fear. She turned to leave, and his fingers grazed the back of her hand. A feather-light touch. She froze. Walsh took a step forward. "I said no talking." "It's fine," Rachel said, her voice calm, professional. "He's disoriented." She met the patient's gaze. A silent plea was etched there, so raw it stole her breath. This wasn't disorientation. This was a warning. The first rehook came an hour later. Briggs was replaced by another deputy, a man named Hanks who reeked of coffee and contempt. He brought a paper bag. "His clothes," Hanks grunted, tossing it onto the counter. "Evidence." Rachel nodded, logging it. But when Hanks stepped out to take a call, curiosity got the better of her. She peeked. Jeans, a torn t-shirt, and a small, blood-soaked notebook. Its spine was broken, splayed open to a page filled not with words, but with meticulously drawn symbols, dollar signs, stylized crowns, and a series of initials next to dates and amounts. A ledger. Her blood went cold. This wasn't just a shooting. This was a hit. She shoved the bag aside just as Hanks returned. "Problem?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "No problem," Rachel said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Just making space." The patient, Alex, watched her from the bed. He'd seen her look, a barely perceptible shake of his head, a message: "You shouldn't have done that." The tension in the room became a physical thing, thick and suffocating. Every alarm, every page over the intercom made the deputies jump. They weren't guarding him from escaping. They were guarding him from someone else, or waiting for something. At 4:17 a.m., the monitor's steady rhythm spiked. Alex's heart rate skyrocketed. He began to tremble, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. "He's in distress," Rachel announced, moving quickly to his side. Walsh blocked her path. "It's an act, settle down. His pressure is dropping. He could be bleeding internally. Step aside, asterisk now asterisk." Her tone left no room for debate. It was the voice that made interns shrink. Walsh hesitated, then moved. Rachel worked fast, checking the surgical site, the IV lines, no fresh bleeding. This was a panic attack, pure and simple. She placed a hand on his uninjured shoulder. "Alex, look at me. Breathe with me." His wild eyes found hers. He was mouthing something over and over. She leaned closer. "Crown," he whispered, the word lost in the hiss of oxygen. "The crown." Before she could ask, Walsh was pulling her back. "That's enough, back off." The standoff was broken by a new voice at the door. A man in an expensive overcoat flanked by a uniformed captain. "Internal Affairs. Officer Walsh, we need a word outside." The captain's gaze swept over Rachel, then the patient. "Nurse, you are to continue care. Do not leave this room." The IA agent's presence changed everything. Walsh's arrogance evaporated. He followed the captain into the hall, throwing one last, venomous look at Alex. The door shut, leaving Rachel alone with the patient for the first time. The silence was deafening. Alex's breathing began to slow. The panic in his eyes shifted to something more desperate, more focused. He strained against the cuff, reaching for her. This was it. The moment every instinct told her to ring for help, to follow protocol. But the ledger, the terror, the IA visit, it all pointed to a truth she could no longer ignore. She took a step closer. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was weak, feverish, but his intent was iron. He pulled her down until her ear was inches from his lips. The smell of antiseptic and blood filled her senses. His voice was a ragged scrape, each word a monumental effort. "They won't let me leave alive." She pulled back, staring at him. The 5 words hung in the sterile air, a death sentence and a confession. Before she could respond, the heart monitor emitted that single, piercing flatline tone. Not from his heart. His rhythm was steady. It was the lead pulled loose in his struggle. But the sound was a trigger. The door burst open. Walsh and Briggs stormed back in, the IA agent gone. Their faces were masks of fury. They'd heard the alarm. Briggs went straight for the monitor, silencing it. Walsh stood over Alex, his voice a low growl. "What did you say to her?" Alex shut his eyes, playing unconscious. Walsh turned to Rachel. His smile was thin, dangerous. "Nurse," a word in the hall. This was the cliffhanger, the point of no return. The hallway was empty, the nursing station deserted. Walsh backed her against the cold, tiled wall, his forearm resting beside her head, not touching her but caging her in. "You seem like a good nurse," he said, his voice eerily pleasant. "You want to keep being a nurse, so listen carefully. Whatever he told you, you forget it. He's a junkie, a liar. He's trying to trade made-up stories for a deal." He leaned closer, the smell of stale coffee and mint on his breath. "The man who shot him is dead. Case closed. Your only job is to keep him stable until 6 a.m. Can you do that?" Rachel's mouth was dry. She managed a nod. "Good girl." He patted her shoulder, a gesture that felt like a threat. "Now go back in there, do your job. And remember," he looked toward the room where a defenseless man lay chained to a bed, "these walls have ears." He walked away, leaving her trembling in the fluorescent glare. She looked at the closed door of room 7. Inside was a patient who had just entrusted her with his last hope. Outside was a system ready to swallow them both. Her shift had 3 hours left, and she knew with terrifying certainty that Alex Rios would never make it to 6 a.m. Rachel walked back into room 7. The door clicked shut, sealing her inside with a truth she couldn't unhear. Alex's eyes tracked her, wide and waiting. Every rule said to walk out, report the threat, protect her license. But the man in the bed wasn't a suspect. He was prey, and the wolves were wearing badges. She moved to the sink, washing her hands with mechanical precision. The water was scalding. She needed the burn, the shock to clear the fear. In the reflection of the chrome faucet, she saw Walsh take up his post again, a dark silhouette in the doorway. His warning echoed. These walls have ears. Her first move was pure theater. She approached the bed, her face a mask of professional detachment. "I need to check your dressing," she said, her voice loud enough for Walsh. Alex flinched as she peeled back the surgical tape. She leaned in, pretending to inspect the wound. Her whisper was barely a breath. "I saw the book." His entire body went rigid. His eyes screamed a silent asterisk, no asterisk. "The symbols," she murmured, adjusting the sterile gauze. "The crown, what is it?" He turned his head away, shutting down. She moved too fast, scared him. She finished the dressing, her mind racing. The clock read 4:41. 1 hour and 19 minutes until shift change, until transport, until he disappeared into a system that wanted him silent. The next rehook came from the hallway, a whispered argument, Briggs' voice strained. "Not part of the deal, Walsh, this is getting too deep." Walsh's reply was a venomous hiss. "You took the money, you're in it. Now shut up and stand post." Then footsteps fatting. Briggs was leaving. Rachel's pulse hammered. A deal, money. This wasn't just about guarding a witness. This was a contract. She had to make Alex talk. She picked up his chart, a prop. "Bloodwork's back," she announced for Walsh's benefit. "Your potassium is low, can cause arrhythmia. I'm going to give you a supplement through your IV." It was a lie. The bag she hung was just saline, but it gave her cover to linger by his side, to manipulate the tubing close to his ear. "They're paid," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "I heard them, you were set up. Who's the crown?" This time he didn't shut down. A tear escaped, tracing a path through the grime on his temple. When he spoke, it was the faintest exhale. "Not a who, a what? A fund, police benefit fund. They skim from evidence, from seizures. The ledger, it's the proof." The pieces snapped together with horrifying clarity. A dirty police fund. Alex, the accountant, had kept the books. He'd gotten scared, wanted out. The shooting wasn't a random gang hit. It was an internal affair, and the officers assigned to protect him were his intended cleanup crew. Walsh shifted in the doorway. "Everything all right in here?" "Stable," Rachel called back, her voice miraculously steady. She patted Alex's arm, a gesture of reassurance. Her fingers brushed against a ridge beneath the thin hospital blanket near his hip, something hard, rectangular, not a medical device. She kept her expression neutral, but her mind was screaming. He had something on him. The real ledger, a copy. "I need a fresh blanket," she said, straightening up. "He's chilled." She turned to the supply cabinet in the corner, putting her back to Walsh. Her hands shook as she pulled out a thermal blanket. This was her only chance. As she unfolded it near the bed, she deliberately fumbled. The blanket slipped, cascading over the side rail and onto Alex's legs. "Oh, clumsy," she muttered, leaning over him to gather it up. In that shielded moment, her hand dove under the blanket, following the ridge. Her fingers closed around a small, flat, plastic-covered object, a USB drive taped to his thigh. She palmed it, her heart in her throat, and smoothly tucked it into the waistband of her scrubs as she stood, the blanket in her arms. The whole motion took 3 seconds. "Let's get you warmed up," she said, spreading the new blanket over him. Her eyes met his. A flicker of understanding passed between them. "I have it." The weight of the drive felt like a brick against her skin. She had just stolen evidence. She had just made herself a target. The tension escalated at 5:15. The charge nurse, Linda, a woman with 30 years of senile exhaustion, appeared at the door. "Rios's transport is here early. County jail van. They're downstairs." Walsh nodded. "Good, we'll get him ready." "No," Rachel said, the word out before she could stop it. Both Walsh and Linda stared at her. "He's not medically cleared for transport. He's 4 hours post-op. Moving him risks rupturing the arterial repair. He needs at least 12 hours of monitoring." Linda frowned, checking the chart. "Vitals are stable. The jail infirmary can monitor him. With all due respect, Rachel pressed, her voice firm, protocol is clear. GSW with vascular involvement requires overnight observation in a surgical unit. The jail infirmary is not equipped. If he bleeds out in transit, that's on us. She was citing hospital policy, weaponizing bureaucracy. It was the only shield she had. Walsh's face darkened. The orders come from the precinct, sweetheart, not you. The orders, Rachel fired back, holding his gaze, violate standard of care. I will not release a patient who is not medically stable. I'll have to call the attending surgeon and file an incident report. She was bluffing, playing a hand she didn't have. Calling the surgeon would take time. Filing a report would leave a paper trail. A silent war played out in the hallway. Linda looked from Rachel's defiant stance to Walsh's simmering anger. The nurse's duty to the patient clashed with the pressure from law enforcement. It was the institutional conflict made flesh. Fine, Walsh spat. 1 hour, but at 6 a.m. he moves. And you, he pointed a finger at Rachel, will sign the release form. Linda gave Rachel a long, searching look before walking away. The message was clear. You've just made a very powerful enemy. With Walsh fuming in the doorway, Rachel had a momentary shield. His authority had been checked. She used it. She needed to see what was on the drive. The only computer she could access was the old med dispensing station in the adjacent clean utility room. It was offline from the main hospital network, used only for logging narcotics. I need to document the vitals conflict, she said, moving toward the door. Walsh didn't stop her. He was on his phone, texting furiously. The utility room was a closet of shelves and a scratched counter. Her hands trembled as she pulled the USB drive from her waistband and plugged it into the dusty computer. The screen flickered to life, prompting for a password. She almost screamed in frustration. Then she remembered Alex's words, a fund, the Crown. She typed CROWN access denied. She tried variations. Crown 1, the Crown, nothing. Think he was an accountant. Dates, numbers. She recalled the page in the blood-soaked notebook. A date, March 15th. An amount, $50,000. She typed 31,550K. The screen blinked and a file directory opened. Her breath caught. Folders labeled by year. Subfolders by precinct. She clicked on the most recent. Spreadsheets detailing cash seizures from drug raids, real amounts logged, then smaller amounts officially deposited. The difference in the hundreds of thousands was routed to an account named Crown BNEFITS. Memo lines listed payouts, vacation bonus, vehicle allowance, consulting fees. Next to each were officer badge numbers. Walsh's badge number was there. Briggs, dozens more. This wasn't a few bad apples. This was a rotten orchard. And then she found the subfolder labeled TRMNATUNS. Not firings. It was a ledger of payments for something else. $25,000 next to a case number. She cross-referenced it. The case number belonged to a deceased informant from 8 months prior, ruled an overdose. Another payment, $50,000, next to the case number for a small-time dealer who'd allegedly hanged himself in a holding cell. Alex Rios's name was in the next entry. Status, pending, payment, $75,000. She was going to be sick. They didn't just plan to silence him. They had a price list for it. The door to the utility room flew open. Rachel jerked, slamming the laptop shut. It was Linda, her face pale. Rachel, my office now. I'm in the middle of. Now, Linda's voice brooked no argument. The charge nurse's office was a glass-walled box filled with paperwork. Linda shut the door and pulled the blind. What in God's name are you doing? She hissed. My job, the patient is. Don't, Linda cut her off. She sank into her chair, looking suddenly old. I just got a call from the deputy chief of police. He expressed concern about your conduct. He suggested you might be emotionally compromised, forming an inappropriate attachment to a criminal patient. Rachel's blood ran cold. They were moving to discredit her. He hinted, Linda continued, her voice dropping, that if you were to step away from the case, any minor licensing issues from your past, a delayed narcotics count from last year, for instance, could be overlooked. It was a threat wrapped in a bribe. They'd done their homework. 6 months ago, Rachel had been 15 minutes late signing off a morphine vial, a procedural slap on the wrist. Now it was leverage. They want you off this floor, Rachel. They want you to go home and forget you ever saw Alex Rios. And if I do? Linda met her gaze, her eyes filled with a weary, fearful resolve. Then I am ordered to suspend you for possible drug diversion pending an investigation. Your license will be suspended. You'll never work in this city again. She pushed a piece of paper across the desk, a voluntary leave of absence form, predated. All she had to do was sign. This was the institutional wall, the full, crushing weight of the system coming down to protect itself. Her career, her life's work, balanced against the life of a man in room 7. "What would you do?" Rachel whispered. Linda looked at the closed blind, at the shadow of Walsh passing by outside. "I have a mortgage, 2 kids in college." She didn't say the rest. The answer was clear. She would sign. Rachel picked up the pen. She looked at the form. Then she placed the pen back down. "He told me they won't let him leave alive. He has proof, Linda, on a drive. It's not just him. They've done it before." The color drained from Linda's face. The professional mask crumbled, revealing raw horror. She knew. In her 30 years, she'd seen things, heard whispers. She'd always looked away. A loud commotion erupted from the hallway. Shouting. The distinct sound of a gurney banging against walls. Linda stood up. What now? They rushed out. The scene outside room 7 was chaos. 2 new men in jailer uniforms were wrestling a screaming, thrashing Alex Rios onto a transfer gurney. His IV was ripped out, blood streaking the floor. Walsh was helping, but his actions were violent, pinning Alex down with excessive force. "Stop," Rachel yelled, rushing forward. "You're tearing his suture." One of the jailers shoved her back. "Stand aside, ma'am. Prisoner transfer." "He's not a prisoner. He's a patient. He hasn't been discharged." She turned to Walsh. "You said 6 a.m. Walsh shrugged, a cruel smile on his face. "Orders changed. He's being transferred to a more secure facility." The way he said secure facility made her stomach turn. It meant a place with no witnesses. Alex caught her eye across the scrum. His face was a mask of pure terror. He mouthed 2 words, "the drive." They were taking him, now, and the drive with all the evidence was burning a hole in her scrubs. If she did nothing, he would be dead by sunrise. If she tried to stop it, she'd be destroyed. The jailers clamped new, heavier restraints on his wrists and ankles, shackling him to the gurney. They began to wheel him down the hall toward the service elevator. This was the bridge, the point of absolute no return. Rachel made her choice. She didn't scream, she didn't fight. She turned and walked quickly, not toward the commotion, but in the opposite direction, toward the stairwell. Linda called after her, but she didn't stop. She hit the door to the stairs at a run, taking the steps 2 at a time down to the ground floor. She had to get to the loading bay before the elevator did. She had one desperate, insane play left. The only person who might believe her, who might have the power to stop this, and who hated Walsh almost as much as she now did. She burst out into the cool, pre-dawn air of the ambulance bay. Hidden behind a dumpster, she pulled out her personal phone, her fingers slipping on the screen. She found the number from a business card she'd never thought she'd use. The IA agent from earlier, the one who'd made Walsh nervous. She prayed he was real. The phone rang once, twice. The service elevator light above the bay door began to descend. They were coming. A voice answered, groggy with sleep. "Agent Miller." Rachel spoke in a frantic rush, her words tumbling over each other. "This is Nurse Rachel Ellison from County General. The informant, Alex Rios, is being illegally transferred right now. The officers guarding him are part of the Crown. They're going to kill him. I have the evidence on a USB drive. They're taking him out the service bay now." There was a beat of stunned silence on the line. Then the sound of movement. "Stay where you are. Do not approach. I'm 10 minutes out." 10 minutes is too late, she cried, but the line was dead. The elevator doors slid open with a metallic groan. The jailers pushed the gurney out into the bay, Walsh leading the way toward a waiting, unmarked van with tinted windows. Its engine was already running. Rachel watched from the shadows, the USB drive clenched in her fist. Agent Miller was too far away. Alex was seconds from disappearing. Walsh opened the van's rear doors. As they lifted the gurney to load him in, Alex managed to twist his head. His eyes scanned the darkness, finding her hiding place. He didn't look pleading anymore. He looked resigned. He gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod, a thank you, a goodbye. It was the acceptance in his eyes that undid her. She couldn't stand there and watch. As the jailers heaved the gurney into the van, Rachel stepped out of the shadows. She didn't run toward them. She walked slowly, directly into the path of the van's headlights, her hands held up empty. Walsh saw her, his face contorted in rage. "You stupid bitch, get out of the way." "You can't take him," she said, her voice ringing across the concrete bay. "I am his nurse, and I am formally declaring a medical emergency. His condition is deteriorating. I am invoking my right and duty to intervene." She was inventing legal jargon, stalling, putting her body between the van and its cargo. The driver, a hulking man she didn't recognize, got out. "Move the girl, Walsh." Walsh advanced on her, his hand going to his belt, not to his gun, but to his handcuffs. "Nurse Ellison, you are obstructing justice. You're under arrest." This was it. They would take her too. The drive in her fist felt useless. The evidence would die with her. Just as Walsh's hand closed around her arm, a new set of headlights, blindingly bright, swept into the bay. A black SUV screeched to a halt, blocking the van's exit. Doors flew open. Agent Miller hadn't come alone. Two other men in tactical vests marked Internal AFFAIRS emerged, weapons drawn but pointed at the ground. "Everyone freeze. Step away from the vehicle and the patient." Miller's voice was a whip crack of authority. Walsh released her arm as if burned. His face was a portrait of shock and fury. "Miller, this is a custodial transfer. You have no jurisdiction here." "I have jurisdiction over police corruption, Walsh," Miller said, walking forward, his eyes hard. "And over attempted murder." He looked past Walsh to the van. "Get the patient out, now." The standoff was absolute. For 5 seconds no one moved. The jailers looked to Walsh. Walsh's hand hovered near his weapon. The IA agents held their ground. Rachel held her breath. The USB drive was a secret burning in her closed hand. She had brought the cavalry, but she'd also stepped into the open. There was no going back now. And as Agent Miller's gaze finally landed on her, she knew the next words would decide if she was a witness or the next target. Agent Miller's gaze locked onto Rachel. "The drive," he said. It wasn't a question. She opened her fist, the small plastic rectangle glinting in the headlights. But as she handed over the evidence, she saw Walsh's expression. He wasn't looking at the IA agents. He was looking past them at the hospital's security camera above the bay door, and he smiled. The game wasn't over. It had just changed boards. Miller took the drive, slipping it into an evidence bag. His agents quickly disarmed Walsh and the two jailers, placing them in cuffs. The sudden shift in power was dizzying. One of the IA men helped transfer Alex, now sobbing with relief, back onto a proper hospital gurney. "Get him back upstairs to a secure room," Miller ordered. "Post 2 of our men. No one from the precinct comes near him." He then turned to Rachel. "You're coming with me." He didn't take her to a police station. He drove her to a nondescript federal building downtown, to a windowless interview room that smelled of old coffee and industrial cleaner. For 3 hours, she told her story. Every detail, from the ledger in the evidence bag to the whispered argument between Walsh and Briggs. A stern woman from the state attorney's office took notes. A technician cloned the USB drive, his face grim as files populated the screen. It was during this debrief that the first major pivot hit. The technician, a young man named Colin, looked up from his laptop. "Sir, this encryption is unusual. It's police grade, but it's layered with something else. Military grade wrappers. This wasn't made by a patrolman with a spreadsheet." Miller leaned over his shoulder. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the architecture of this data fortress is way beyond a slush fund. This is intelligence-level compartmentalization." He clicked open a hidden partition Rachel hadn't found. The folder was labeled Falcon. Inside were not financial records but profiles. Photographs, addresses, family details, schedules. They were judges, city council members, 2 reporters, a state's attorney. And the final file, a dossier on internal affairs agent Robert Miller himself. His home address, his wife's workplace, his daughter's school. The last modification date was yesterday. The room went cold. Miller stared at his own life, digitized and categorized on the screen. His professional mask finally cracked, revealing naked fear. "They were compiling targets," he whispered. Rachel felt the floor drop away. The Crown wasn't just stealing money. It was building a hit list, a system to control or eliminate anyone who could threaten it. And Alex Rios, the accountant, had been their meticulous archivist. "We have to move." "Now," Miller said, his voice tight. He began barking orders into his phone, arranging protection for the people on the list, starting with his own family. The scope of the conspiracy had just exploded from precinct-level greed to a citywide shadow network. But the countermove came faster than anyone expected. As they were preparing to leave the federal building, Miller's phone rang. He listened, his face turning to stone. He hung up and looked at Rachel, a new kind of dread in his eyes. Walsh and the jailers were just released, on the orders of the deputy chief. Insufficient evidence for arrest. "How we have the drive," Rachel protested. "We have a asterisk drive," Miller corrected, his voice hollow. "The official report from the precinct's IT unit filed an hour ago states that Officer Walsh lawfully seized a contaminated USB drive from an informant. He was transporting it to headquarters for analysis when you, a nurse with a history of narcotics discrepancies, assaulted him and stole it. The security footage from the loading bay has been edited. It shows you attacking him, not the other way around." Rachel's blood turned to ice. They had flipped the narrative. She was no longer a whistleblower. She was a criminal, a drug-diverting nurse who'd attacked a police officer and stolen evidence. The drive in their possession was now tainted, its provenance disputed. Alex's testimony would be that of a desperate informant against the word of decorated officers. "They own the cameras, they own the report. They're 2 steps ahead," Miller said, slamming a fist on the table. "They knew we'd get the drive, they planned for it. This was a containment strategy." The institutional walls weren't just closing in, they were shifting to crush her. Miller advised her to get a lawyer to go into hiding. He couldn't protect her. His own position was now compromised. As she left the building, the dawn light felt hostile. She was alone. The next rehook came via her own phone. A blocked number, a text message. It contained a single photograph. It was a grainy, long-lens shot of her younger sister, Kate, leaving her apartment building for her morning coffee run. The timestamp was 30 minutes ago. Beneath it, a message. "Stop digging. Your signature on the leave form is due by noon, or Kate has an accident." The threat was now horrifically personal. They weren't just threatening her license. They were threatening her family. They'd done their research on her, too. Terrified and furious, Rachel didn't go home. She went to the only person she thought might have a piece of the puzzle she was missing, Linda, the charge nurse. She found her in the hospital parking lot after her shift, looking exhausted and haunted. Linda saw her inside. "I signed the form, Rachel. I'm out. I'm sorry." "I need to know what you know, Linda. You've been here 30 years. You've heard things about the Crown, About Falcon. The older woman's eyes filled with tears. She looked around nervously before gesturing Rachel into her car. She drove in silence for 10 minutes, then pulled over in a quiet park. It started years ago, Linda began, her voice trembling. A benevolent fund, they said, for cops injured in the line of duty, for families of those killed. No red tape. It felt noble. Then the rules changed. The donations became mandatory, the skimming started, and then about 5 years ago it changed again. It got ruthless. A new group took over its management. They called it the Falcon Committee. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about power, cleaning house. Who? Rachel pressed. Who's on this committee? Linda shook her head. I don't know names, but it's not just police. The money flows through shell companies. Some of them, they're owned by people with city contracts, construction, waste management. She took a shuddering breath. There was a nurse before you 18 months ago. She saw something she shouldn't have in the ER. She tried to file a report. She died in a hit and run 2 days later. It was ruled an accident. The wait, it gets worse, moment settled like a lead weight. This wasn't just about Alex Rios. Rachel was walking the same path as a dead nurse. The conspiracy had a body count. Linda gave her one more thing, a name, Leo Vance. He was a retired police auditor, a stubborn man who tried to investigate precinct finances years ago. He was forced out, labeled a crank. If anyone kept their own records, it would be him. He lives off-grid, up in the Pine Hills. It was a thread, frayed and thin, but it was all she had. With her phone likely tracked, Rachel bought a cheap burner phone at a convenience store. She called her sister using a vague story about a contagious patient, telling her to go stay with their parents out of state immediately. She heard the fear in Kate's voice but didn't explain. Then she ditched her car in a long-term parking garage, took a bus, then a train, heading north out of the city. She used cash for everything. For the first time in her life, she was in hiding. The professional caregiver was now a fugitive, hunted by the very people sworn to protect. She found Leo Vance living in a weathered cabin. He was in his 70s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He was expecting her. Linda called, he said simply. Told me you might come. Told me you have the Rios ledger. He'd been waiting for someone to bring him proof. For years, he'd been compiling his own files, a paper trail of inconsistencies, bank records, and odd deaths. He spread them across his kitchen table, a mosaic of corruption. He connected the Crown's money to a city councilman who'd zoning approval for a lucrative development. He linked Falcon, target profiles to stalled investigations and sudden resignations. You have the digital key, Vance said, tapping the copied files from Rachel's drive on his old laptop. I have the map. Together, they don't just show a crime, they show a takeover. But as they worked, Vance's ancient police scanner crackled to life. An APB, an all-points bulletin for her. Rachel Ellison was wanted for assault, theft of evidence, and suspicion of narcotics distribution. Her photograph filled the screen. The system had officially branded her the villain. This was the lowest point. Hunted by the police, separated from her life, with only a paranoid old man and a terrified informant as allies. She looked at the bulletin, at her own face, and felt a terrifying clarity. She could run, try to disappear, or she could use the hunt to her advantage. She made a decision. She asked Vance for one of his old, untraceable digital recorders. She called Agent Miller on her burner phone. They've issued an APB for me, she said, the recorder running. I know, Miller's voice was strained. I've been suspended. The official line is I mishandled evidence and collaborated with a suspect. They're digging into my life, Rachel. I can't help you. I don't need your help, she said, her voice steady for the first time in hours. I need you to deliver a message. Tell them I'm done running. Tell them I have the full, unredacted Falcon files, not just the financials. And if anything happens to me or to Alex Rios or to my family, they will be published automatically to every major news outlet in the country. The dead drop is set. The clock is ticking. It was a colossal bluff. She had the files, but no dead drop, no automatic publish. but she needed to sound like a threat they couldn't just eliminate. She needed to force them to the table. Miller was silent for a long moment. "That's a dangerous play." "It's the only one I have left," Rachel said and hung up. The reaction was swift. Not an hour later, her burner phone rang. A blocked number, but a different voice. Calm, educated, devoid of Walsh's thuggishness. "Nurse Ellison, let's talk. You have something we want. We have something you want. Your life back. A meeting. 1 hour. The old Riverpoint warehouse, Dock 7. Come alone. If we see anyone else, your sister's accident happens tonight." They'd taken the bait, but they'd also upped the ante, reconfirming the threat to Kate. This was it. The negotiation or the trap. Vance argued against it, but Rachel knew this was the only move. She had to look into the eyes of the conspiracy. She left the cabin, Vance's tiny pistol a cold, unfamiliar weight in her jacket pocket. He drove her to the outskirts of the city, dropping her a mile from the warehouse. "Good luck," he muttered, his face etched with worry. He knew the odds. The Riverpoint warehouse was a decaying monument to the city's past, its broken windows like blind eyes. Dock 7 was around the back, overlooking the black, sluggish water. She approached slowly, every sense screaming. A single figure stood under a flickering security light. It was Walsh. It was a man in a well-cut overcoat. He turned as she approached. She recognized him from Vance's files. Councilman James Roth, the one with the zoning approvals. "You're braver than I expected," Roth said, his smile polite, chilling. "Where are the files? Where's the guarantee for my family? And for Alex Rios?" she countered, her voice not shaking. "The informant will be transferred into federal protective custody. A done deal. Your sister will be left alone. And you will sign the leave form, admit to emotional distress and pill diversion, and enter a private rehab facility. In 6 months, this all goes away. You get your license back with a note of rehabilitation. A clean slate." It was a win designed to make her complicit. She would become part of the cover-up, her confession invalidating all her claims. They would own her silence forever. "And the crown and falcon?" she asked. "Disbanded, a regrettable relic. We're already winding it down." He said it like he was discussing a failed community garden. She knew it was a lie. They'd just go deeper, change the name. They were offering her a gilded cage and the death of the truth. She had to choose. Take the deal, save her sister and maybe Alex, but let the corruption live on. Or reject it and trigger a war she would likely lose. Before she could answer, headlights swept across the dock. Not one car, but 3. They were Roth. Doors opened, and men in tactical gear emerged, moving with professional precision. At their head was Agent Miller, his face hard as flint. "Councilman Roth," Miller called out, his voice echoing across the concrete. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, and obstruction of justice. And no, this isn't City IA, these are FBI." Roth's polished composure shattered. "This is outrageous. On whose authority?" "On the authority of a federal judge who just signed warrants based on evidence provided by Nurse Ellison and Mr. Vance," Miller said, his eyes meeting Rachel's. A flicker of apology and respect. He hadn't abandoned her. He'd gone over the heads of the corrupted city power structure, straight to the feds. The suspension had been a ruse to make them think he was out. As the FBI agents took Roth into custody, Miller walked to Rachel. The dead-drop bluff was smart. It made them panic, forced Roth to surface himself. "We've been tracking him. We have Walsh and the others in custody, singing like canaries to save their own skins. Your sister is safe. Alex Rios is already in a safe house." The relief was so profound it felt like a physical blow. The good guys had arrived. The cavalry was real this time. But as they led a sputtering Roth away, Miller lowered his voice. "It's not over, Rachel. Roth is a middleman. The Falcon Committee has deeper roots. This is a start, not an end. And you're a public hero now and a target. You need to disappear for real for a while." He handed her a folder. New identification. A plane ticket, a bank card with funds, witness protection until the trials are done. It's the only way. She looked at the ticket, at the new name that wasn't hers. It was safety. It was survival. But it was also another kind of cage, another erasure. She stood on the dock, the city's skyline glittering in the distance. She had started the night as a nurse. She was ending it as a whistleblower, a fugitive, a pawn in a war she'd never meant to fight. She had saved a life, maybe many lives, and she had lost everything familiar. Agent Miller put a hand on her shoulder. It's time to go. Rachel Ellison took one last look at her city, then turned and followed him toward the waiting car, the weight of the unknown future heavy on her shoulders. The battle for the truth was won, but the war for her life was just beginning. The plane touched down in another country under a name that wasn't hers. Maya had a small apartment, a view of mountains, and a silence so deep it echoed. The federal marshals said she was safe, but safety felt like a cage. For 6 months she didn't speak the words nurse, city, or crown. Then the news broke, and her old life came crashing back through the screen. It was a Thursday morning. She was drinking tea, trying to read a book in a language she was still learning, when the international news channel cut to a press conference. The banner read, "Major Corruption Scandal, ROCKS City Hall Police Department." There was the U.S. attorney, flanked by FBI officials. And there, standing slightly to the side, was Agent Robert Miller, back in a suit, his badge visible. The list of indictments was read aloud. Councilman James Roth, Deputy Chief of Police Alan Dwyer, 11 police officers including Walsh and Briggs, 3 city contractors. The charges: racketeering, conspiracy, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder related to the deaths of the informant and the nurse from 18 months prior. They called it Operation Clean Sweep. The anchor explained how a secret fund, dubbed the Crown, had been used to siphon millions, influence contracts, and silence critics. A shadow committee, Falcon, had compiled dossiers on public officials. The case, they said, was built on the courage of a confidential informant and a whistleblower whose identity was protected for her safety. Rachel Maya sat on her couch frozen. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. The monsters were in handcuffs. She watched as perp walk footage flashed across the screen. Walsh, head down, being led into a federal building. A vicious part of her soul, the part that had been terrified in the ambulance bay, sang with relief. But the relief was short-lived. The news segment shifted. Talking heads debated the systemic failures and blue wall of silence. They used words like unprecedented and house cleaning. Then one pundit, a former prosecutor, said the line that made her blood run cold. While the whistleblower's actions were heroic, we must ask if the ends justified the means. The theft of evidence, even from corrupt officers, sets a dangerous precedent. They were already reframing the narrative, turning her into a controversial figure, a necessary but messy tool. She wasn't a hero to them. She was a problem. Her burner phone, the one only Miller had, rang that evening. His voice was tired but clear. "You saw." "I saw," she said. "It's a start. The trials will take years, but the dam is broken. Alex Rios testified before a grand jury for 2 days. He's holding up. He asked about you." "Is he safe?" "As safe as anyone can be. New identity, new place, like you." Miller paused. "Linda resigned, took early retirement. She sent a message. She said, 'Thank you for not looking away.'" Rachel closed her eyes, a single tear tracking down her cheek. That meant more than any news headline. "And you?" she asked. "Reinstated, promoted actually, to head the new integrity unit. My first job is dismantling the remnants of Falcon. We're auditing every precinct." He let out a long breath. "It's not over, Rachel. Roth is talking, trying to deal. He's pointing fingers higher up. There are names on the Falcon list we still can't touch. Powerful names." So the war continued, just on a different front. She was a spectator now. Life as Maya was a study in contradiction. She was free but isolated, alive but not living. She worked a quiet job at a local clinic, filing records, no patient contact. They thought she was a widow starting over. She wore the story like a borrowed coat that never fit. The nightmares were the worst, not of Walsh but of the flatline tone, the feel of the USB drive in her hand, the sound of her sister's voice when she told her to run. Survivor's guilt was a constant companion. She had a life, however muted, while the nurse before her, the one Linda mentioned, was in a grave. 8 months in, the marshals arranged a supervised, secure video call with her sister, Kate. Seeing her face, healthy and smiling, talking about her new job in another state, was a balm. Kate didn't know the details, just that Rachel had helped stop some bad people and had to disappear for a while. "I'm proud of you, sis," Kate said, and those words almost shattered her. After the call, a profound restlessness took hold. She had fought for truth, but now she was buried under a lie. She missed the ER, the crisp feel of sheets, the focused calm of a crisis, the tangible act of fixing something broken. Here, she fixed nothing. The surprising detail came in a plain manila envelope, left in her clinic mailbox with no postmark. Inside was a single photocopied sheet. It was a patient intake form from her old hospital, dated 2 years ago. The patient's name was redacted, but the diagnosis was clear: late-stage liver failure due to chronic alcoholism. The attending physician's signature was there: Dr. Evan Roth, Councilman Roth's brother. Scrawled at the bottom in handwriting she recognized, Leo Vance's tight, precise script, was a note. The good doctor covered up his brother's DUI that killed a family of 4. The Falcon file had the real report. Thought you should know the whole truth. Stay safe, L. She stared at the page. This was the final knot. The origin of Roth's corruption wasn't greed for money, it was a cover-up for family. The crown was his insurance policy, his way to buy the power to bury his brother's crime. The conspiracy had a human, pathetic heart after all. It didn't make it better, it made it clearer. This was Vance's way of giving her closure. And a message. The truth, the whole truth, still mattered, even if only 2 people knew it. It was that envelope that changed her. She couldn't go back to nursing as Rachel Ellison, but Maya didn't have to just hide. Maya could build something. She used her small stipend to take online courses in crisis counseling and trauma support. She began volunteering, cautiously, at a local women's shelter, using her medical knowledge to help in subtle ways. She didn't tell her story, but she listened to others. In their trauma, she found a purpose for her own. A year after the indictments, Miller called with an update. The first trials had resulted in convictions. Walsh got 25 years. Briggs, who turned state's evidence, got 10. Councilman Roth was fighting every charge, but the evidence was overwhelming. The city had established a new, transparent oversight committee. The reforms were real, if imperfect. "Alex wrote a letter," Miller said. "For you, I can't give it to you, but I can read it." He cleared his throat. "Dear Nurse Rachel, I live near the ocean now. I work in a library. I still have nightmares, but I also have mornings. I breathe the air and it doesn't taste like fear. I owe you that breath. Thank you for not letting go of my hand." Rachel cried then, deep, healing sobs for the first time since it all began. That was the payoff. Not the headlines, not the convictions. A man who was meant to die in a van was alive, working in a library, tasting clean air. She still jumped at sudden noises. She still checked every window locked twice, but she started painting the empty walls of her apartment. She bought a plant and kept it alive. She began to build a life, not just occupy a hiding place. On the 2-year anniversary of the night in the ER, she went for a long walk in the mountains. She stood on a ridge, the wind pulling at her hair, and she said the words aloud for the first time since she'd heard them. "They won't let me leave alive." Then she whispered her own 5 words back into the wind. "But we did. We lived." She walked back down the mountain as the sun set, the sky painted in colors of fire and gold. She was not Rachel, the celebrated whistleblower. She was not Maya, the timid fugitive. She was something new, forged in fear and tempered by an unthinkable choice. A woman who had looked into the abyss of a corrupted system and didn't just report it, she broke it. She returned to her apartment, to her simple life, to the quiet struggle of moving forward. The fight was over, but the living remained. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The door to her old life was sealed shut, but a window to a new one was finally, truly open. The story of Rachel Ellison and Alex Rios is more than a thriller. It's a blueprint, a map of the moment a single person, standing at the intersection of duty and conscience, chooses to see not just a patient, but a human being, and in doing so, recalibrates the moral compass of an entire city. We began with a flatline and a whisper. We end with a quiet life by the mountains and a man who breathes free air by the sea. But the space between those 2 points is where our world is shaped. It's in the bays, the overnight shifts, the moments where protocol meets principle. It's in the ledgers kept in the dark and the courage to hold them up to the light. Corruption, at its heart, is a story we tell ourselves about inevitability, that the system is too big, the players too powerful, the cost too high. Rachel's story rewrites that narrative. It proves that the most powerful force against a conspiracy isn't a gun or a law, it's a nurse who won't look away. It's the stubborn, inconvenient humanity that refuses to become a bystander. But this story leaves us with a haunting, essential question, one that isn't about them but about us. In the routine of our own lives, in our jobs, in the systems we navigate, what are we willing to see? And more importantly, what are we willing to do when we see it? The walls that silence us aren't always made of concrete and steel. Sometimes they're made of fear, of routine, of the quiet promise that if we just keep our heads down, we'll be safe. Rachel traded safety for truth. She exchanged a career for a conscience. And in the calculus of a broken world, that is the rarest currency of all. The reforms in that city are real. The indictments are a matter of public record. But the true victory, the one that can't be legislated or reported, lives in the quiet resolve of everyday people who remember that before we are professionals, we are human, that our oaths are not to institutions, but to each other. If this story resonated with you, if you felt that pull towards the light in the darkness, then you understand the power of narrative. You understand that these aren't just tales, they are reflections, warnings, and blueprints for our own courage. Your support allows us to find and tell these stories, to dive into the complexities of the human spirit and bring back something that matters. So if you haven't already, take a second to subscribe to the channel. Hit that button and join our community of viewers who believe in the power of a story well told. Every click, every subscribe is a signal. It tells us you're here for more than just entertainment. You're here for the truth, however messy, however costly, however hopeful it may be. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, the next time you hear a story about a whistleblower, a nurse, an informant, or just someone who chose to do the right thing in the wrong place, know that it started with a choice. A simple, terrifying, and ultimately world-changing choice to care. We'll see you in the next